the same book we were reading last time, The Silly Stories. And this one's called The Banker's Boring Birthday. So we're going to read through this short story, find out how boring his birthday is. All right, The Banker's Boring Birthday. Mr. Smallwood was a very important person. He was very well-dressed, tidy man who believed that there was a place for everything and that everything should be in its place. Every day he put on a crisp white shirt, tied his tie with a nice tight knot, put on his nice blue suit, shined his shoes until he could see his face in them, and walked briskly across the park to the bank where he worked. He was the manager of the bank, and he managed it very well. All in all, Mr. Smallwood was a very well-respected figure. Now, as you can imagine, Mr. Smallwood didn't take very many days off, but he thought his birthday should be one of them. However, he didn't really like staying home because there was nothing to do. His bed was made, his dishes were washed and dried and put away. His socks in the drawer, marked socks, and he read all his books. Everything was in its place. With a sigh, he realized that he missed the bank. Then he telephone rang. "Good morning," he said, "Mr. Joseph. Smallwood speaking. How can I help you?" And then, "Yes, of course. Certainly. I'll be there right away." He hung up the telephone and smiled. Just as he thought. They needed him at the bank right away. They couldn't manage without him. Hurriedly, Mr. Smallwood put on his shirt and tie and his neat blue suit and stepped out into the street. Not such a boring birthday after all. It was a bright, sunny morning. The birds were singing in the trees. The traffic officer was writing tickets. The cars were in a standstill. Everything was as it should be. A perfectly ordinary day. Mr. Smallwood hadn't gone far when he came across a pig. "Now that's not right. That's not the right place for a pig," said Mr. Smallwood. "I should catch that animal and take it to the market." So he chased the pig into the park. But the pig had other ideas. With an excited squeal, it dashed off to hide in the rose bush. Mr. Smallwood made a daring leap. He flew gracefully through the air, and stretching out his arms, he caught the pig. Then with a loud thwomp, they landed in a large, smelly heap of horse poo. Ew! "Golly," said Mr. Smallwood, as he stood up. The front of his suit and his glasses were covered in horse manure, but the pig was safely in his arms. Mr. Smallwood set off slowly across the park in the direction of the market. Now it may have been because he was distracted by the struggling pig, or it may have been because he could not see very well, but he didn't see the stack of paint cans outside the library until it was too late. Crash! He went into the cans, and down fell Mr. Smallwood and the pig into the tide of cannery yellow paint. Mr. Smallwood stood up. There was paint all over his glasses. He couldn't see hardly anything, but he couldn't wipe his glasses because he was still trying to hold on to the pig. He kept struggling. He was not a man to give up easily. He hadn't gone far along the pavement when, bump, he walked into a stand outside the florist. Flower pots and plants stumbled to the ground, breaking into 1,000 pieces that trickled down around his feet. But one pot didn't break. As it fell, it turned over gracefully and landed right on top of Mr. Smallwood's head. "Gosh," he cried. Mr. Smallwood, but even in the midst of his catastrophe, he still held on to the squealing pig. So there he is, paint spilling all over him. He's holding on to his pig. You guys see that? So he ran into the paint, can see the pig. He's covered in paint. Can everybody hear me well? Everybody's good? Okay, great.
Melissa puts thumbs
Staggering slightly and a little dazed, Mr. Smallwood walked on. He hadn't gone very far when he heard a voice cry, "Look out!" He walked straight into Claude, the waiter at the crepe cafe. Claude was serving pancakes and ice cream to some of the customers, but they didn't get them. Down went Claude. Oh! Up in the air went his tray, and slap, 2 pancakes landed squarely on Mr. Smallwood's shiny shoes. Always a polite man, Mr. Smallwood turned to apologize to Claude and his customers. "Sorry," he called out. But before he knew what was happening, he was falling, stumbling backwards into a hole full of muddy water on a construction site. Oh my goodness. "Golly," said Mr. Smallwood, and still holding firmly onto the pig, he pulled himself out of the hole. Now maybe it was because he was tired by now and not concentrating, or maybe it was because he had manure and paint and mud on his glasses. But Mr. Smallwood didn't realize that he was on a construction site. He also didn't realize he was pulling himself up by a rope attached to a pile of cement bags. The pile swayed and the pile wobbled. The top bag slid off and exploded majestically over Mr. Smallwood's head, covering him in a cloud of cement dust. Mr. Smallwood coughed, wheezed, and sputtered as the cloud gradually cleared. So there he is with the waiter. Pull it back, there he goes. So there's the waiter problem. He ran into the waiter and spilt food all over the customers, got pancakes on his head. And the next one, there's the cement bags pouring all over him at the construction site. Oh, Mr. Smallwood's birthday is a crazy one. Pretty boring if you ask me. The cement began to harden as it soaked into Mr. Smallwood's damp suit. He walked away stiffly. He hadn't gone far when he heard a familiar voice calling his name. "Mr. Smallwood! There you are! We were wondering where you were." It was Mrs. Tillhead, the assistant bank manager. Tired and a little shaken, Mr. Smallwood allowed himself to be led into the bank. As soon as he entered the building, a cheer went up. "Hurrah!" he heard. "A happy birthday!" Someone removed his glasses and cleaned them for him, and he looked around the room. The ceiling was hung with brightly colored streamers and balloons. Above the teller's windows was a huge banner with the words, "Happy birthday, Mr. Smallwood," and a table was bending under the weight of chips, sandwiches, and cake. All his employees had thrown a surprise birthday party for him. Mr. Smallwood was very surprised, but not as surprised as everyone else. Instead of seeing the small, dapper bank they expected and respected, they saw in front of them a man walking stiffly in cement-covered suit, with a flower pot on his head, pancakes draped over his shoes, smelling very strongly of horse manure, and carrying a yellow, wiggling pig in his arms. "Golly," they cried. And that was it. That's the end of the story. So Mr. Smallwood ended up getting a surprise birthday party, and he's carrying a pig and looking crazy, eh? How was that story? Did you guys like that? Was it funny? Do you think it was a boring birthday? If you think it was a boring birthday, put your thumb down. If you think it was an awesome, funny birthday, put your thumbs up. Awesome. Sweet. Oh, sorry. Okay, so on to our next story, guys. This next one is called, can you see that? Try to get in the camera quick. There we go. The Land Where Animals Rule. Who wants to read The Land Where Animals Rule? So I guess that means there's no humans there. So let's get started.
I'm gonna mute you guys.
So this is a nice short story.
So we can all hear.
The Land Where Animals Rule. In the land where animals rule, the children don't go to school. They live on farms and flap their arms. just like the chickens used to do. The post bears always wear blue. It's faster on 4 legs than 2. But it's way better to send things by letter because packages tend to get chewed. Jaguars and speeding cheetahs are stopped when they go too fast by policing cats on with pointed hats, and pandas in polka dot cars. Sorry. Horses take themselves for a ride. They trot down the road side by side. In the carriage they own, they travel alone. There's no room for 2 on the inside. The restaurants where herbivores go, they never eat meat, so I'm told. Cows do the cooking while no one is looking, and its grass is usually cold. If you go for a round the world sail, you travel on the back of a whale. Hold on for dear life when he starts to dive, and look out for the oversized tail. It's fun where the animals rule. No one to tell you what you ought to do. Their idea of fun is to sleep in the sun. It's just the place for a person like you. So that's the animals rule, guys. So this is where the animals rule. We got the cat in a pointy hat. We got the post bear. We got the cow serving grass. The horses walking side by side. Only one animal can fit inside the carriage. And a whale with a tail. Would you look at that? Awesome. Okay, so that was just a short little poem. This one is a little bit of a longer one. This is kind of a silly looking story. This does look pretty silly. It's called The Emperor's New Nose. And there's a picture of the emperor. Oh, there he is. There's the emperor and his new nose. So we're going to read the story, The Emperor and His New Nose. Let's see what's up with this new nose, emperor. Okay. Achoo! Oh, the emperor sputtered and wheezed into an enormous white handkerchief. As he blew his sore and throbbing nose for an for the umpteenth time. I'm sorry, guys, I've never seen this word in my life. Has anybody seen this word? Can they share it with me? Do you see it where my finger is? Just above my finger. Umpteenth. The umpteenth time. I don't know what number that is, but throbbing. So, okay, I'm just going to restart. That threw me off really bad, guys.
Used to emphasize.
Achoo! The emperor sputtered and wheezed into an enormous white handkerchief. As he blew his sore and throbbing nose for the umpteenth time that day. To say that the emperor had a cold would be an understatement of the year. This was the cold to beat all colds. All coughing, all sneezing, all sputtering, and all wheezing type of cold. A real throat-aching, eye-watering, bone-shaking, head-rattling. Get the picture? That kind of cold, guys. Well, needless to say, the emperor was fed up, and he wasn't the only one. After all, he was the emperor. He wasn't going to suffer in silence. Oh no. He got all his statesmen and all the courtiers to gather in his stateroom.
I think Darren's putting hands up, so I don't know if he...
Do you have a question, Darren? You're okay. You're all happy, Darren?
He's muted. Like on his other phone.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So he had all his statesmen and all his courtiers to gather in the states room, where he was languishing on a daybed, propped up on a mountain of pillows, clutching a hot water bottle and sipping a large mug of hot lemonade and honey. To his left was the footman fanning him with an enormous feathered fan. To his right was another busy mopping his sweaty brow. The rest of the assembly was required to groan sympathetically as each cough or sneeze shook his aching bones. They had been standing there for 3 days now, and frankly, it was getting somewhat boring. Not to mention the fact that several of them had started snuffling rather alarmingly themselves. As the monstrously loud sneeze shook his large, overfed frame, the emperor used yet another giant handkerchief to toss it into an overflowing wastebasket. I'd give anything for a new nose, he snuffled. The crowd groaned. Oh, and Hugh, with as much sympathy as they could muster. But the court jester, who was worn to a frazzle with his attempt to entertain an ailing emperor, pricked up his ears at once. A new nose! What a marvelous idea! Why ever didn't I think of that myself? And you'd really give anything for a new nose? The court jester said, smiling slyly. Anything, wheezed the emperor, if only it were possible. Anything is possible, your majesty, smiled the court jester mischievously, bowing low. Now it just happens that the court jester has had his eye on the emperor's fair daughter, Bella, for quite some time. She was taken with him, too. She liked his sense of humor. There was just one problem. Emperors didn't like daughters marrying jesters. It wasn't good for the image, having a son-in-law whom people laughed at. But as the emperor had given his word in the front of his entire court to grant any wish, the jester knew he would find it hard to wiggle out of his commitment. So sensing the opportunity to claim Bella as his bride, he immediately got to work transforming the emperor's unhealthy nose. Taking out his big bag of tricks, his book of spells, and his magic wand, the court jester rubbed his chin thoughtfully. As far as the court jesters go, he was a pretty good one. He had a reputation of jokes for all occasions, was a master of silly walks, and an expert at juggling, fire eating, and tightrope walking. A dab hand at card tricks, and not too bad at magic, but not too good either, as the emperor was about to find out. After several minutes spent looking through his book of spells, the court jester found just the right one. Transformation of body parts. Difficulty rating 4 stars. Not for the inexperienced or the faint-hearted. Well, it was a bit too difficult, but a lot was at stake. And so he decided to give it a try. Word soon spread among the courtiers of the impending transformation spell. This should liven things up a bit. An excited hush fell on the room as the jester set up sparkly purple curtains around the emperor. So here's the jester. He's setting up curtains. Oh, too far. Oh, no, there he is. And there's the emperor in the bed in the back there. And he's about to cast his spell to change the emperor's nose. So let's find out what happens when he casts the spell, guys. Does anybody want to share? Raise your hand if you have a guess what's going to happen when he starts casting spells on the emperor's nose. Anybody? Or should I just keep reading? All right, I'm going to keep reading then. The jester paced up and down, muttering under his breath. He was deciding on the exact wording of the spell and practicing until he had it down pat. Then he picked up his wand, tapped it on his spell book, and asked for silence as he recited the magic words. Abracadabra, snuffles and wheezes, away with nose, with sputters and sneezes. Something grand, imposing appear. In its place, a noble nose fit for a true leader's face. With that, he waved his wand in the air, making a trail of sparkling stars behind the screen. There was a bright green flash of light, and the audience let out a great gasp as the court jester pulled back the curtains to reveal the emperor with his new nose in all its glory. It was certainly grand, certainly imposing, and definitely fit for a noble leader, as long as he was leading a herd of elephants. For there, right in the middle of the emperor's startled and alarmed face, was the elephant's long, twisty trunk. So the jester just turned his nose into an elephant's trunk. Look at this. Look at the emperor's new nose. Oh my gosh. That's the emperor's new nose right there. Okay. Well, what a commotion broke out. At first, the courtiers were stunned into silence. Then there was a great hullabaloo, since not knowing whether to laugh or cry, they bombarded the secretly astonished and horrified court jester with questions. I say secretly, because although his magic skills were not very much good, he was a complete professional and was not about to let on for one moment that this was anything but what he had
Travis?
intended to do.
You too.
I think John might have question. I don't know if he's just.
I think he's laughing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
He was also well aware that the emperors are notoriously easy to fool. And lucky for him, this one was no exception. Your Majesty, he exclaimed, bowing low, I am delighted to report a complete success. What a noble and distinctive nose. What an exceptionally unique profile. Doesn't he look marvelous? The court jester turned to the courtiers, who anxious not to offend the emperor, all loudly declared their approval. And what's more, the gesture continued. No sneezes, you will see. The emperor looked at him doubtfully, entirely unsure how he should react, and gave a tentative sniff. A rush of clear air filled his lungs. Still, the emperor looked unconvinced. And so the court jester quickly pointed out the many uses and advantages of a magnificent trunk. And the emperor, who above all else was really determined not to look like a fool, decided that the best course of action was to pretend to everyone that he was utterly delighted. You are a genius, court jester, and you may have anything you wish for, proclaimed the emperor. By the time he had finished extolling the many virtues of his new nose, he even had himself convinced. Of course, the court jester wasted no time in claiming the fair Bella's hand, and the wedding was arranged to take place at once. Bella was summoned from her bedchamber, where she had rushed to change into her wedding dress and veil as soon as the court jester had started his spell. The emperor looked on with resignation as the beloved daughter became the jester's blushing bride. And blushing she was. You may now kiss the bride, declared the minister. The court jester eagerly lifted Bella's veil, closed his eyes, and puckered up, and planted a big, sloppy kiss on her rough, wrinkled, rather hairy trunk. Well, like father, like daughter, I guess. Oh, and as for the elephant, he never did figure out what happened to his trunk, or why he was left with the most terrible cold. Achoo! So what happened was he turned the emperor's nose into a trunk, but I guess like father, like daughter, the daughters got a trunk too, and then he married a girl with an elephant's nose. as his prize. And then he ended up getting the Emperor's Sneeze. That end of that one. That was a good one. All right, guys, that's going to be our last story today. I hope you enjoyed them. So I thought that was pretty funny. A lot of fun stories there. I hope you guys also did. And again, don't forget to draw. We have chat coming up. If you can finish your candy rock by the chat, even if you just painted any color, call it a nerd. Good. Just painted anything. And I will see you guys at chat. Okay, guys? Take care. Bye.